Welcome back to Family Twist. I'm Corey, and I'm thrilled to have you with us for part 2 of this incredibly moving conversation between Kendall and our guest, Rich Erlaw. If you joined us last time, and if you didn't, please check out that episode first, you know that Kendall and Rich are exploring what it means to be an adoptee, navigating everything from the highs of discovering family to the complex and painful realities that follow. Today's episode picks up right where they left off, with Rich opening up even more about his personal journey and the powerful inspiration behind his musical, For the Records. It's a story of resilience, healing, and reclaiming identity in a world that doesn't always understand what it means to be adopted. So grab a cup of joe, settle in, and get ready for part 2.
I was really impressed not only with For the Records, which we can talk about too, but also the advocacy work that you've been doing with the, sorry, I'm going to get this wrong, the Coalition for Truth and Transparency in Adoption, and then the connection to Adoption Search Resource Connection.
Yeah, thank you for asking about those. Adoption Search Resource Connection came first. So ASRC, Adoption Search Resource Connection, started as a group called Adoptees in Search here in Colorado back in the mid-'70s. And at that time, they were advertising in the newspapers because, of course, there was no internet. And they would have little small group meetings around the city and hooked up with other local groups around the country and formed a national organization that started having conferences. And advocacy was part of Adoptees in Search as far back as the 70s, where, and I wasn't involved then, I didn't even know they existed, but they were trying to get access to records. Their first bill sponsor was Wellington Webb, who later became the mayor of Denver. But he wrote in his memoir that he got death threats for carrying the bill to open original birth certificates to adult adoptees. He got death threats over it.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
I can't. It's just...
And he was one of the few black legislators in the Colorado State Legislature at the time. But it was specifically over that issue, not over his race. So there's a story for the record book, right? And then as we grew and formed a 501c3, 501c3s are great because donations given to them are tax deductible. However, there are limitations on how much you can spend on legislative education, where you really can't spend more than about 20% of what you take in on lobbying legislative education. As the national movement grew, we thought really to do what we want to do and have the freedom to do what we want to do, we should form a 501c4, which is a lobbying group. And so out of that came the Coalition for Truth and Transparency in Adoption. And we're really thrilled to be a resource for people working in different states. In Colorado, once you're at this long enough, you just meet people who have similar interests. Several outstanding lobbyists who've helped us through the years. And a lot of the changes have happened in incremental steps. There's a segment of adoptee land that feels like the only right way to do legislation is all or nothing all at once. And when that can happen, I'm 100% for it. However, there's a reason they call it sausage making, right? And each state's laws are different. The personalities are different. The party in control is different. You don't know where the landmines are in terms of somebody who might have a personal connection to the issue that seems like they're your friend, and then they turn around and sponsor a bill to undermine what you're doing. And so it can be very fraught in terms of what's happening. Our approach has been, let's be strategic in each state with a clear long-term goal in mind. And as a result of approaching things that way here in Colorado, we've seen, since 2014, probably close to 15 bills passed. We've seen a Court of Appeals ruling one in 2010. We saw several bills passed before that were all incremental steps that were less than what we wanted. It started with a state registry back in the 80s. And then there came an intermediary program in the late 80s. And then there came a bill that prospectively would open records and retrospectively before a certain date where there was no, quote, promise of anonymity. And by chipping it away, Colorado now has one of the most comprehensive records access laws in the state. We got the law changed so birth parents can go back to the agency and get copies of the records they signed, because many of them never got records. We changed the law so that siblings who came through the state home and were adopted into different families can find out who each other are. And then lately we've been working on things for foster youth who are aging out of the system to help them get driver's licenses and insurance. And we've gotten the truckers involved. And so it's just taken on a life of its own. And anything we can do to be a resource or offer strategic ideas, that's really what we're all about.
I love it.
It was a long answer to a short question, but I hope that all made sense.
It did. And that's the kind of advocacy that I want our listeners to hear about. I think what I've learned, Corey and I have been living in New Hampshire since we moved here, and it's different in such a small state. Talk about everybody knowing everybody. It's true. And I feel like our resources are fewer. So it's not that I don't need anything from the system now, but I feel like there are others who do, who struggle. But I appreciate that your agency has been focused on other states as well. I think that's an inclusive way to approach the issues.
And each state, the experts are the boots on the ground in that state, where if they're at the Capitol, they're meeting people, they're finding out the personalities. I'm just like, here's a toolbox, and if something works, great. If not, don't use it. Most recently, and this is pretty cool, but Colorado is also the first state with Senate Bill 224 in 2022 to turn the corner in opening it up so that if someone is a sperm or egg donor here, they do so with the understanding that when the child that they create or children they create become adults, they will know the identities of those donors. That was a bombshell to the industry. It wasn't a perfect bill. There was a lot of horse trading back and forth, and we testified in support of the bill and helped generate support. I was not one of the leaders in that. Senator Steve Fenberg, who is the outgoing Senate president, was one of the bill sponsors. And of course, it doesn't hurt to have the Senate president as one of your bill sponsors.
Oh, that's great. Wow.
Now we have the baby box bills coming up. So there's bills we're trying to pass and bills we're trying to kill.
The work that you're doing is making Corey and me that we've always been interested in legislation, but I think we can see that's where we need to devote more time and help and where we can, where we are. That's definitely our direction for the future, because it's great to tell stories. I love learning about all these adoption stories and donor conceived people's stories and parents not expected stories. I love all the stories, but I feel like so many of the people who might be listening are just at a stalemate and don't know what to do next. And not so much the people that we're speaking with seem to have figured out a lot of things, but I worry about people who have just been told to shut up for all their lives.
And advocacy, one thing we've learned about it, and I so appreciate you saying that, because you learn that there are people who care, there are ethical people who get it, and then there are other people who really don't care, or it's just not on their radar. It's not a plank in their platform.
Right.
And so be it. I shared recently on another podcast that we spent years going down to the Capitol and weeping and crying and hoping that people were going to emotionally get how it felt to be in our shoes. And there are a rare few who will have that level of compassion. But what we learned is you have to give that up. And you have to understand that advocacy is, at its core, it's sales. You are persuading people to your viewpoint. You're educating them about things that they don't know. You're overcoming objections. And you're pointing them to a better solution, a better, quote, product than what they have right now. When you do that, you take off your wounded adoptee hat and you put on your advocate hat. It's very empowering. but you also have to be thick-skinned about it, because you're going to hear insensitive, offensive, ignorant, rude things as you go. Advocacy is important and empowering, but not for the faint of heart.
No, I completely agree. And the way I can relate to that is that I've been a human resources guy for 28 years. And my joke is that everybody, citizens in your state or employees in my building, first thing that they think of usually is what's in it for me. So that's where you need to appeal to them from a citizen's perspective. Yeah, I might even have empathy for you in your story, but how does it serve me well?
And what's good policy? That's another way that our talking points have shifted, because we went in for years banging the table about adoptee rights until we realized that legislators think their job is to represent all their constituents, which is their job. And when they hear one group saying, we demand our rights, the immediate response is, well, what about birth parent rights? What about adoptive parent rights? Then you've created an immediate adversarial situation that doesn't really exist in most cases. But instead, when you go say, okay, so what's good policy? It's not the competing interests, it's not the competing rights, it's what's good policy here. Truth and transparency in adoption is good policy, and here's why. We've seen that some well-intentioned but not well-informed people set policies back in the mid-century that were based on ignorance in many cases. And we've seen that it worked out okay in some ways, but now that we're all adults, it was short-sighted. That's very different than saying these terrible people ripped us from our histories and destroyed our identities, and we were all given to narcissistic adoptive parents, and this whole thing sucks and it should all be abolished. How far is that going to get?
Right. And you are marginalizing a lot of people by going that route.
And that may be your personal conviction. In the world of sales, that just doesn't play well. And when you walk in with your master's degree and your nice suit and your well-spoken look and all that kind of stuff and try to tell them how oppressed and marginalized you are, and the next group coming in are in wheelchairs and they're on oxygen, you have to be smart about how you do what you do.
Absolutely. Yep. It's all about optics. It is. I've lived my professional life that way, so I can relate. What do you want to tell me about us, about For Your Records? I really haven't talked as much about that. I think it's wonderful, and I'm curious about what's next for that project.
Part of my goal with For the Records is I think we've got a handle on using social media. We've got a handle on trying to get into the news stories. People are writing some great books and great memoirs, but nobody's done a musical about this. And there's a place, I think, where music gets into the limbic brain in a way that's non-offensive and not confrontational, and allows people to develop empathy and educate them without having to be in your face about the issue. And so my goal is, let's help create this cultural shift. I've had actors who were not involved with adoption in any way say, I had no idea. Or parents of actors who came to see and they said, we had no idea. You've got to get this out there. This is such a powerful story. We did not realize this is what adoptees go through. And how do you cram the full spectrum of the adoptee experience into 2 acts and 17 songs? You can't.
But
it's a broad brush swipe at it that combines the education and the emotion. They say it can take 7 to 10 years really to get something up on its feet, and it won't take that long.
Yeah.
Because people are seeing it and responding. I just did a pitch I had the opportunity to be part of a pitch workshop that had producers and directors from all over the country, and was really pleased with the questions they were asking and the songs they were moved by. And several said, I'm definitely interested. Please follow up with me.
Very cool.
And so we're in the process of doing that follow-up. And it ain't cheap. Doing a one-person show is very different than having 14 characters and 5 of them doubling as somebody else. Fortunately, it's less expensive. This is not going to be Les Miserables. This is not going to be Frozen. These are just regular people in street clothes going to support group meetings and showing up at court hearings and sitting around the kitchen table.
That's great. Corey and I will do our little part in trying to help get out that word too. We think we're both such big music and musical fans that this is right up our alley. And he was so moved by what he saw at the Untangling Our Roots conference. And he rushed. He talked about a lot of things when he got home, but yours was one of the first things that he told me about. He was like, oh my gosh, I got to tell you about this. So it was just, I could see where, and Corey he's a supporter, right? I'm his connection to the adoption world, but he loves the content, and anything we can help you do to promote it, we will.
One thing, we just got a really nice video. Kara, who is one of the conference planners, she and her husband have some really great video skills, and they put together a nice video of the staged reading, and we're deciding how to roll that out. The right doors are opening at the right time. The right people are showing up at the right time. And so I just totally convinced this is something that I really believe is meant to be.
Very good.
And I'm learning and adjusting and editing and doing a little rewriting as we go.
Very cool. I hope you'd be open to reconnecting with us, that we could, in the future, talk about how things have gone with it.
Absolutely.
That's our optimistic outlook. But it does sound so worthwhile and meaningful for a lot of us, even those outside the community will really appreciate it, I think. So very cool.
That means a lot to hear you say that. And the songs really do make the difference in terms of getting into people's hearts and brains. Among women, generally the favorite is Real Mother, where you've got the adoptive mom and the young relinquishing birth mom, Blanca, singing on opposite sides of the stage. Am I a real mother because there's another who gives him what I could not? And among guys, there's a division. They like the I Want song, which is Dying to Know, which young Joshua sings right after he finds out that he was adopted in a not very pleasant way from his friends. And people, the anthem, I would say, is Testify, which is at the end of Act 1, where it's the get up on your feet, fight for your rights song. Gospel style, sung by amazingly talented young singer here in Denver named Yasmin Hunter, who blew the roof off.
Very cool.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you again for the work you're doing. I think between the agency and your music work, I just think it all sounds fantastic.
Onward. There's still a lot to do.
Rich, thank you so much. Corey said he'll talk to you again soon. He couldn't be with us tonight, but he wishes you well too.
It's been a pleasure. I look forward to it.
Such a powerful conversation. And we're so grateful to Rich for sharing his journey with us. Hearing him and Kendall open up about the struggles, triumphs, and everything in between is a reminder of the strength and resilience in the adoption community. Rich's work with For the Records is really inspiring, and it's clear that art can really be a path to healing. If today's episode resonated with you, or if you know someone who'd find comfort in hearing these stories, please share it with them. And as always, we love hearing from you, so drop us a line with your thoughts, questions, or just to say hey. Thanks for joining us, and remember, family secrets are the ultimate plot twist. Family Twist Podcast is presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications and produced by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC, and features original music by Cosmic Afterthoughts.